Hello, my name is Kyle Overmyer. I'm from Sunbury, Ohio, but originally from Fremont, Ohio, which is north, and I live in near Columbus, Ohio now. I'm a father, a husband, a stepfather, a grandfather, addiction advocate, a former sheriff, and I'm also a felon. So I have a variety of different titles, and I'm very proud of each and every one of them.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us. Could you start off by sharing a little bit about your childhood?
Yes, actually, I had probably the picture perfect childhood. Both parents married. They will be married here in October. 54 years. My father retired after 38 years in law enforcement as a captain in the Sandusky County Sheriff's Office. My mother worked for a prominent construction company in Fremont, Ohio, and they loved and cared for us and gave us everything we ever needed and put a roof over our head, and they were very well respected and still are in the community as well.
Absolutely. So when did you first start experimenting with alcohol or drugs?
The only time I ever actually, would drink, in my teen years, but not to excess. Never smoked marijuana actually, probably until I was in college. And after that, it hasn't been since I was 19 years old.
Okay. And could you talk a little bit about what your life was like in, after college and going into the police force?
Yes. Well, it all started, you had to start at the bottom of the totem pole. I worked in corrections for a few years, road patrol, where then I gravitated towards drug interdiction, believe it or not, which is pretty ironic. I had a really good knack for taking a lot of drug dealers off the streets on traffic stops, seizing large amounts of drugs, money, guns. And the sheriff then, prior to me, he started to really recognize that. And at that time, I went back and I received my 2-year degree in police science from Terra State Community College. And during that time, I was married, had my first child, my daughter, Michaela. And then I decided to go back and further my education and obtain my bachelor's degree in business administration from Tiffin University. I had other aspirations to go to the federal level. So I started to interview and send in my resume and stuff a little bit. And then the sheriff heard about it and didn't want me to go. So there was an opportunity, there was an opening that came up in the detective bureau. And so he said, "Hey, Kyle, would you be interested in staying? Because I don't want to see you go because you have a lot of potential, especially in narcotics investigations." So I stayed, and he made me a sergeant. And within a year then, I moved up to the ranks of captain. I was a detective captain at about 27 years old.
Wow.
Yes. From that point then, I worked undercover with DEA, purchasing large quantities of cocaine. And then up until 2008, my sheriff then, it was Sheriff Dangler, he had talked to me even prior to that, you know what, if your career keeps going, I'd like to see you take over after I retire and be the sheriff. Well, lo and behold, about 2 weeks after talking about that, he died.
Oh my gosh.
He died, and we had an emergency election, and I was only 34 years old, very young at that time, and I had to make a decision what I was going to do. And I became the youngest sheriff in the state of Ohio at that time.
Wow.
At 34 years of age. So I took over, and currently I'm still the youngest in county history as well,
Right.
being 34. And I bit off a lot more than I could chew, but I had to chew it and I had to swallow it. So from that point on, during that time, we had some incidents where we had a fatal shooting, which then I ended up unfortunately sued for $20 million. Personally, that went on, but we ended up, I even went through a federal trial, and we were found justified in it, but there was a lot of stress on me. Kyle was too busy taking care of everybody else and didn't take care of himself with people getting therapy. I didn't get any therapy then. Also, we had an event where unfortunately I was called out on a Sunday. I'll never forget. I had to leave my son's bitty basketball game, and I had 3 kids that fell through the ice in the mouth of the river. Tried to rescue them. They all drowned. So, of course, continued to take care of everybody else, and I never took care of Kyle. all of it started to catch up with me, and I had a lot of aches and pains in my ankles. I'd broken both of them as a child. So eventually I went to a therapist, and lo and behold, they gave me 105 Vicodin a month.
Oh my goodness, right off the bat.
That's what I ended up having. So I thought, you know what, this is gonna do it. And unfortunately, my physical pain started to lessen, but my mental pain got worse. So the use kept getting more and more and more. You know, I can remember even, you know, those 105, you know, sometimes they would only last 2 weeks and then it would be a week or a few days. So at that point, I had to find other resources to feed my addiction. But a lot of times I tell myself, oh no, I'm not addicted. So I began to go in between doctors and started to doctor shop with multiple doctors. And I even got to be very creative and started to steal pills from the take-back box that were, you know, disposed of from, you know, citizens to feed my addiction. So as time went on, I was eventually on February 3rd, 2015, which was a blessing at that time. I had a pharmacist that I'd go all the time, and, you know, I would fill my same prescription. She said, Kyle, I want to talk to you one day. And I thought, oh, there's probably some kind of criminal activity, me being the sheriff. They all knew me, and we used to have a lot of good conversations. She said, Kyle, you're done. You're done getting narcotics. I got to call the doctors. You're going between several doctors, and it's caught up with you. And that day, my heart went to my stomach. I was scared. I didn't know what was going to happen to me, but I knew it was time to stop. So I went home and I flushed my last Vicodin down the toilet. I'll never forget. And I went cold turkey. I was too ashamed, and I was in denial, and I didn't want anybody to know about my dirty little secret. So from that point on, I was up then for the general election coming up, August 23rd, 2016. I was at the Sandusky County Fair in my uniform and being the sheriff and doing my ribbon cutting. By 6:30 that night, I had a 43 count indictment. I was in an orange jumpsuit for doctor shopping and stealing pills from the take-back box.
Wow.
And so eventually then I was still denying. I was like, everybody's out to get me. And I bonded out on a $150,000 bond the first time. And believe it or not, my ego was so big because of, you know, not wanting anybody to know. I continued to run for sheriff.
Wow.
I didn't give up. Well, then as time went on, my son's birthday was coming up, and he wanted a crossbow for his birthday. So I went to buy him a crossbow while I was out on bond. They had followed me and watched me, and then I had was going to have a bond hearing because they wanted to violate my bond. I took because it was a dangerous weapon. So in turn, I'll never forget, November 2nd, I took my son to school, and he said, am I going to see you after school, Dad? I said, I got this. I went, they gave me a $250,000 cash, no 10%, couldn't, and that was it. That's the last time I saw daylight. I went to Marion County Jail. They took me there because they didn't think anybody knew me. Lo and behold, I knew people there. Mm-hmm. So that's where I started to really surrender for my sobriety and come to terms. And I started speaking with my parents about it and started to really make baby steps into it. Wrote the letter to a judge talking about my addiction. And I went to my first AA meeting in there, believe it or not, which kind of monumental.
Yeah.
There was only 3 people in it, but it meant a lot to me. That time then, I worked with my attorney and the prosecutor, and I pled to 12 counts. So I went on December 13th, 2016, and the judge asked me, what do you want, Mr. Overmyer? I said, you know what? I'm an addict. I need treatment. Please, can I get some treatment? She said, Mr. Overmyer, I'm going to give you the best treatment in the state of Ohio. You're going to prison for 4 years.
Wow.
And that was an oh my God moment.
Yeah.
And that was either, am I going to relapse or how am I going to handle this? So from that point, I went on and I continued to stay sober. My first 30 days were actually in Grafton in solitary confinement. They separated me for protective custody, But eventually I didn't stay in protective custody. I signed out and went to general population with everyone. My first jump off the bus, I had drugs offered to me. And no. And I continued no, and I stayed abstinent, and I served all 4 years while I was in prison. And I served all the 4 years. I stayed abstinent, and I got deep in my recovery. I even went back to school. I got, actually my 20 hours I got to finish for my CDCA, and I can combine it now with my bachelor's and become a therapist.
Right.
So I did that, and I got really, really deep into it and very vocal about it. And a lot of people respected me. And I noticed a lot of people that were struggling while they were in there, they started to gravitate towards me. And I would sit down with them and help them get through, because they would relapse while they were in there.
Yeah.
Think, hey, Kyle, can I talk to you? And I started to understand that was my purpose. Utilize, your fall to your rise that way. So I went all the way through abstinent, got out April of 2020, and found myself, I was homeless and frying chicken back in my hometown, believe it or not, for $9.50 an hour.
Wow.
And a lot of people come in, took pictures, made memes, laughed at me. But I said, you know what? I got this. If I got through 4 years and, stayed abstinent, I didn't relapse, I can continue to do this. I'd been through a divorce while I was in prison. And, a lot of it was my doings. And I had 2 children too. I didn't see my kids for 4 years. And ultimately, I had to build that relationship back up. And then from there, I met a woman named Jennifer. And through some friends and Facebook. And 6 weeks later, we were married.
Wow.
And and during that time, I ended up getting enough money. I was living in an apartment, and believe it or not, I was living back in the hood where I used to kick doors in. And I put myself back in all those places because I needed to take responsibility, and I didn't need to be a coward and take accountability and responsibility for my addiction, for my actions, and build myself back up. So about 6 days later, my phone rings, my newly wife, Jennifer, my phone rings, we're out eating pizza, and the guy's like, hey, I have a place down in Columbus area, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to work in business development. Lo and behold, I didn't have to commute. I moved back down there. I served a year of parole too. I got off of parole, and then ended up working for a facility over in Pennsylvania. After that, the jobs keep getting better, and now here I am. I'm the regional director for Hickory Network, getting ready to help open up a facility in Cambridge, Ohio.
That is super cool. Could you talk a little bit about how you started to rebuild those relationships, especially with it being so high profile, and your kids having to live through that? You're the person that they go to for protection, and your job literally is protection, and just everything being so out there for everybody to see.
Communication, vulnerability, and therapy. And I think those 3 are the right equation to success when it comes to your relationships during, your recovery. I communicate with my kids daily. I'm very open and honest. I talk about my addiction. They ask me questions. I tell them point blank what I did and why I did it. I guess taking responsibility was a huge thing. And vulnerable. I'm very vulnerable about when I speak, like when I go out and I have, my side thing of KO addiction, when I go out and share my story, when I travel. And and going to therapy. I go to therapy twice a month. I think it's a very vital piece of my, recovery. I look forward to it, and it's going to make me a better Kyle. And I always say in recovery, there's no such thing as perfection, only progression. I will never be perfect, but as long as I evolve and go forward, that's what it's all about.
So one other question from because your law enforcement background and having so many different positions and rising to where you did gives you a different perspective than a lot of people have. So what are the things that we need to start looking at more on the macro level of of making some changes. I mean, when people commit crimes, that we need to arrest and whatnot, but we've pretty quick, I mean, we've shown we can't arrest our way out of this. But what are some of the things that we need to do as a state?
Well, and that's something I think about, and I would like to pursue more, because now I've been on both sides. I've seen it both. I'm in a unique situation where I can probably be very helpful and make an impact. And once I get my wheels going more, because I've only been out 2 years, I'd like to make some changes. Like I said, 80% of the people in prison are addiction or mental health. They're struggling. So, unfortunately, I think we're still so quickly to punish instead of rehabilitate. And so we have 27 prisons in the state of Ohio, and about the population of about 53,000 just in prisons, not county jails. So think about if we can make a change and make some of those rehabilitations and rehabilitate some of those amazing people.
Right.
Think about it, what it could be, what our community, it would not only be saving lives, but it's still saving tax dollars too.
Yes.
Because of the recidivism rate, you're still spending the money over and over and over and putting them in. And guess what? Where are they getting? Nowhere.
Right. They're not taxpayers.
Absolutely.
Right.
So guess what? I think if we could work on that and work on a very good reintegration plan, hand in hand, this could be an amazing state.
Yeah. What are some words of hope you could offer somebody who's struggling?
Don't ever be scared to ask for help. I was not scared. I was too pig-headed. I was too proud. I had a big ego, and I had to get rid of that ego. I had to get rid of that Kyle Overmyer ego. Like I say, I look back at some of these pictures, I don't even look the same anymore. If you look at some, that's not me anymore. I don't know that guy. Most human beings don't like change, but I had to encounter that C word to get to where I am now.
Right. Absolutely.
And I'm going to continue to rise. Mm-hmm. I'm not done yet.
Yeah. Right. Got the rest.
It's only been 2 years.
Right. Beautiful. So thank you so much. Fantastic. You hit on so many fantastic points.
Good.
And really being able to talk about breaking it down different ways. And everybody has their own way of breaking it down. And it's really spectacular. So
Good.
Thank you.